She thought she could erase her past with diamonds, a new accent, and a billionaire's last name. For years, no one questioned her. No one dared to, until one night, a waitress quietly said two words, and the entire illusion cracked in under 60 seconds. Welcome to Untold Journey Stories. If you're drawn to stories that uncover the hidden psychology behind power, fear, and human transformation, make sure to subscribe and support the channel so we can continue bringing you even deeper journeys like this. And what happened next changed everyone in that room. There are certain stories that stay with you, not because they're dramatic, but because they expose something uncomfortable about how the world actually works. A few years ago, I watched a well-dressed woman humiliate a barista over the temperature of her latte. It wasn't about the drink. It was about control. The barista apologized 3 times. The woman smiled in a way that didn't look like happiness. It looked like victory. Ever since then, I've been quietly obsessed with a question. What really makes a bully powerful? Is it money, status, influence, or is it something far more fragile? That's why I can't stop thinking about the story of Megan Cole, a former investigative journalist who found herself waiting tables at a luxury restaurant in Chicago after her newsroom shut down, and Eleanor Whitmore, the polished wife of a tech billionaire who seemed to exist for the sole purpose of reminding everyone around her that they were small. On the surface, this is a story about a waitress who uncovered a secret and brought down a tyrant. But if we look closer, and I want us to look closer together, it's really a study in how fear sustains power and what happens when someone decides not to participate in that fear anymore. Megan wasn't supposed to be there. At 34, she had spent years working behind the scenes for investigative reporters, digging through public records, chasing paper trails, connecting invisible dots. She loved the hunt. She loved truth. But budget cuts don't care about passion. Her department vanished overnight, and 3 months later, she was adjusting the stiff collar of a server's uniform at a 5-star restaurant called the Silver Laurel. The Silver Laurel wasn't just expensive, it was theatrical wealth. Crystal lighting, imported marble floors, a wine list that required a glossary. The kind of place where power didn't just sit at the tables, it performed. And every Friday at 8 o'clock sharp, Eleanor Whitmore would arrive. Eleanor was married to Charles Whitmore, a technology mogul whose companies shaped half the digital infrastructure in the Midwest. But while Charles built platforms, Eleanor built something else entirely. She built fear. Servers whispered about her in the break room like she was weather, unpredictable, destructive, and unavoidable. A young busboy named Adrian once brushed too close to her chair and was fired before dessert. A hostess had to redo her makeup mid-shift because Eleanor deemed the shade provincial. No one challenged her. No one even tried. Until Megan. And here's what fascinates me most about this story. Megan didn't defeat Eleanor with outrage. She didn't scream. She didn't post a viral expose. She did something far more dangerous. She got curious, and when curiosity meets unchecked power, something always cracks. So as we walk through what happened, the humiliations, the investigation, the confrontation, I want us to keep asking the same question. Was Eleanor powerful because she was rich? Or was she powerful because everyone else agreed to be afraid? To understand what happened later, we have to understand the stage Eleanor was standing on. The Silver Laurel was designed to intimidate gently. Everything shimmered. Everything whispered exclusivity. If you worked there, you were constantly reminded that the customer's jewelry cost more than your annual salary. That environment matters, because humiliation hits harder when it happens under chandeliers. Eleanor understood this instinctively. She didn't shout often. She didn't need to. Her cruelty was surgical, precise, public. There was the night Adrian lost his job. His sleeve hovered near her bread plate, not touching, just existing in proximity. Eleanor leaned back as if he contaminated her oxygen. "Is this acceptable hygiene?" she asked the manager, loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. Adrian tried to apologize. He was 19, saving for community college. Within minutes, he was removing his apron while Eleanor observed with cold detachment. And this is the part that unsettles me. Witnesses didn't intervene. They looked down at their plates. Because here's how empires of fear function, especially in luxury spaces. First, the bully establishes unpredictability. Second, they punish publicly. Third, they make examples. After enough examples, no one needs to be threatened directly. The memory of what happened to someone else is enough. Megan saw this clearly during what the staff later called the soup incident. She had been assigned to Eleanor's table unexpectedly. The original server had called in sick and the floor manager hesitated before choosing her, like he was drafting someone for a dangerous mission. Megan prepared carefully, sparkling water with no lemon, gluten-free rolls only, napkin folded diagonally. When Eleanor ordered lobster bisque, Megan watched the chef ladle it straight from the stove. Steam rose visibly. 10 minutes later, Eleanor dipped her spoon in, paused dramatically, and placed it down. "It's cold," she announced. Now here's what's important. The soup, everyone knew it wasn't cold. But that didn't matter, because this wasn't about temperature. It was about submission. Most servers would have panicked, apologized excessively, perhaps cried later in the restroom. That's what Eleanor expected. That's what fueled her. Instead, Megan did something subtle but radical. She stayed calm. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said evenly. "I'll have it replaced immediately." No tremor, no pleading, and something shifted. Bullies rely on visible fear. When they don't get it, their script falters. Later, an older waiter named Leonard told Megan something that changed everything. "Before she married Charles," he said quietly, "nobody in this city knew who she was. She just appeared." That sentence lingered, because in elite circles, lineage is currency. Old money families are documented, traced, archived. If Eleanor had truly been who she claimed, Eleanor Prescott of a long-established Connecticut family, there would be a trail. But Megan couldn't find one. And that's when the investigator inside her, the part that had been dormant but never dead, woke up. This is something I've noticed about former journalists. You can take them out of the newsroom, but you can't remove their instinct to follow inconsistencies. Megan didn't want revenge. She wanted answers. And answers, when pursued carefully, can dismantle entire mythologies. If you've ever tried to reinvent yourself, you know it requires distance from your past. But complete erasure, that's harder. Megan started where she always did. Public records, marriage licenses, property deeds, alumni listings. Eleanor Prescott Whitmore supposedly grew up in Hartford, attended a private boarding school, then studied art history at a small liberal arts college. None of the records aligned. The boarding school had no yearbooks listing her name. The college alumni directory came up empty. Even archived society pages from a decade ago mentioned her engagement to Charles, but offered strangely vague descriptions of her distinguished background. Too clean, too polished. Megan moved to reverse image searches, scanning older gala photos. On page 14 of search results, buried beneath event blogs and charity sites, something unusual surfaced. A defunct modeling agency website from Detroit, archived in 2006. The headshot was grainy, the makeup heavy, the hair aggressively bleached, but the bone structure was unmistakable. Under the image was a different name, Ellie Parker. Megan felt that familiar rush, the electric thrill of a loose thread. A new search, Ellie Parker, Detroit. Results flooded in. Local promotional modeling gigs, a short-lived appearance on a reality TV show called Highway Hearts, which followed young women working at regional auto racing events. And then the clip. Low-resolution footage of a younger Eleanor, except she wasn't Eleanor. She was Ellie. Loud, emotional, fighting with another contestant over a rhinestone crown during a televised finale that ended in tears and accusations. Her accent wasn't polished East Coast, it was unmistakably Midwestern. I want us to pause here because this is where the story deepens. It would be easy to mock that transformation, to laugh at the before and after. But what I see, and what I think Megan saw, is something more complicated. Ellie Parker wanted out of Detroit, out of obscurity, out of being dismissed. So she studied, practiced new speech patterns, curated an identity. Reinvention isn't inherently immoral. In fact, in America, we celebrate it. But here's the fracture. Eleanor didn't just reinvent herself. She began attacking anyone who reminded her of who she used to be. Every server with a regional accent, every young employee trying to climb upward, every perceived lack of refinement. It wasn't disgust, it was projection. The cruelty wasn't coming from confidence. It was coming from terror, the terror that someone might recognize Ellie Parker beneath the diamonds. Megan understood this instinctively. Shame is a powerful motivator. It can drive success, ambition, even transformation. But when shame is buried instead of processed, it often mutates into contempt. Now, Megan held something dangerous, not gossip, not rumor, but documented truth. The question wasn't whether she could expose it. The question was, should she? And more importantly, what would exposure actually accomplish? Because dismantling a bully isn't about humiliation. It's about stopping harm. 3 weeks later, Eleanor arrived alone. And I believe, though I can't prove it, that she already suspected something. Eleanor didn't wait to be seated that night. She walked directly to her usual table, then motioned for Megan. "Sit," she said. That single command broke every unspoken rule of service hierarchy. Megan hesitated. "Employees don't sit with guests." "Sit," Eleanor repeated, "or I'll ensure this restaurant is under new ownership by Monday." There it was, the wealth weaponized. I've studied intimidation tactics in political investigations, and they often follow a predictable escalation: threaten livelihood, threaten reputation, threaten isolation. Eleanor executed all three within minutes. "I know about your layoffs," she said softly, "your debt, your apartment in Logan Square. You're very easy to erase." Imagine hearing that from someone who has legal teams on retainer. Most people would shrink. Megan leaned forward instead. "You're right," she said calmly. "I am very good at research." Then she said the name, Ellie Parker. You can study body language for years and still rarely witness what happens when someone's constructed identity cracks. Color drained from Eleanor's face. Her posture shifted. Her breathing quickened. Megan didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She referenced Highway Hearts, the televised finale, the rhinestone crown meltdown. "I'm not interested in humiliating you," Megan said evenly. "I'm interested in this behavior stopping." That's critical. This wasn't blackmail. It was a boundary. "Leave the staff alone," Megan continued, "or the full story resurfaces." Silence stretched. For the first time in years, Eleanor wasn't the one controlling the room. Fear had migrated. And when she finally stood, she didn't issue a final threat. She walked out. Just like that, the atmosphere in the Silver Laurel shifted. The staff didn't know the details, but they felt the absence of tension immediately. Bullies don't just dominate individuals, they alter environments, and when they retreat, the air clears. Eleanor Whitmore never returned. Within months, rumors circulated that she and Charles were separating. I can't claim direct causation, but I do know this. Once someone confronts a private truth publicly, even in a contained space, it becomes harder to maintain the illusion elsewhere. As for Megan, she didn't remain a server for long. A venture capitalist dining nearby had observed the confrontation. Impressed by her composure and precision, he later offered her a role leading research for a private investigative consultancy. She returned to what she loved. But the real transformation wasn't professional, it was philosophical. Here's what I've come to believe after sitting with this story. Bullies are rarely the strongest person in the room. They're often the most fragile, simply the most practiced at disguising it. They rely on three pillars: silence, isolation, and collective agreement to play along. The moment one person withdraws that agreement, the structure destabilizes. Notice something important. Megan didn't scream. She didn't shame. She didn't perform moral superiority. She presented reality. Calmly, truth delivered without hysteria is destabilizing, and maybe that's the most useful, tasteful takeaway for all of us. Where in your life do you tolerate intimidation because it feels easier? Who benefits from your silence? What illusion survives because no one questions it? We don't all need to conduct investigations into reality TV archives, but we can refuse to feed cruelty with fear. We can respond to manipulation with steadiness. We can remember that wealth, titles, and curated accents don't equal emotional security. Sometimes they're armor, and armor always hides something vulnerable beneath. Megan didn't destroy Eleanor. She forced her to confront the version of herself she had spent years running from. And that, more than revenge, is what ended the reign of fear. Because when someone stops being afraid of a mask, the mask loses its power. And maybe that's the quiet revolution we're all capable of starting. When I think about everything that unfolded at the Silver Laurel, I don't see a dramatic takedown. I see a shift in gravity. For years, Eleanor controlled that room without ever raising her voice. Her power didn't come from shouting. It came from atmosphere, from the unspoken understanding that she could cost someone their job, their confidence, their sense of stability. That kind of influence is subtle, and that's what makes it dangerous. It spreads quietly. It trains people to anticipate humiliation before it even arrives. But what Megan demonstrated is something far more powerful than retaliation. She showed that authority built on intimidation depends entirely on participation. The moment someone refuses to emotionally comply, refuses to panic, refuses to shrink, refuses to validate the performance, the entire structure starts to wobble. Notice, Megan didn't try to destroy Eleanor's life. She didn't expose her publicly for sport. She identified the root of the behavior and drew a line. Calmly, precisely, without cruelty. That's what makes this story meaningful. The deepest lesson here is this: fear-based power is sustained by silence and reinforced by collective agreement. If no one questions it, it grows. If someone calmly names the truth, it weakens. In your own life, this might not look like confronting a billionaire spouse. It might look like not laughing at a degrading joke in a meeting, not apologizing for something that wasn't your fault, setting a boundary with someone who relies on intimidation, refusing to internalize someone else's insecurity projected onto you. You don't need aggression to reclaim your ground. You need steadiness. The practical application is simple but difficult. Regulate your response. When faced with manipulation, slow down instead of reacting. Ask questions instead of defending. Observe patterns instead of absorbing blame. Bullies expect emotional compliance. Calm disrupts that expectation. So here's something I genuinely love to know. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's power over you disappeared the second you stopped being afraid? If you're comfortable, share your perspective in the comments so others can learn from your experience. And if stories like this resonate with you, stories that break down psychology, power, and human behavior, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps keep this space thoughtful, independent, and motivated to create deeper content like this.